Lovely. I can see the webinar's been recorded, so let's get started. Hello everyone, and thank you again for joining us today. And welcome to Digital Health's latest best practice webinar. As always, my name is Hannah Crouch, and I'm the editor of Digital Health. Thank you to everyone who has joined us for today's session, especially ahead of a Jubilee bank holiday weekend. Thank you very much for joining us. And today we're going to be looking at all things patient safety. So the session is going to be covering a range of topics, from how to find the perfect balance between patient safety and user satisfaction, to what the future holds for patient safety, recording and the benefits. So today our panel consists of Molly Kent, who's patient safety specialist at Radar Healthcare, Paul Ewers, who's risk manager at Milton Keynes University Hospitals NHS Trust, and Marcos Manhães, who is head of learning, from Patient Safety Events and National Reporting and Learning System for Patient Safety at NHS Improvement. I hope I've said that right, Marcos. I'm very sorry if I have not. After our group have spoken, we're then going to have the main Q&A session. And just a few housekeeping rules. For those with questions, just a reminder that you can ask them at any point during the webinar. Please do this in the Q&A section. It's the best place to do this. Sometimes they can get lost in the chat, so please do put them in the Q&A section. And you can also vote for your favourite questions there as well. So if you like the look of a question, give it a thumbs up and it'll bump it up my list. I'm now going to stop talking. Actually, no, one more thing, sorry. If you would like your question directed to anyone, so whether that's Molly, Paul or Marcos, please let me know. If not, it's going to be a free-for-all. I now promise I am going to stop speaking, and I'm going to hand over to our panelists. So over to you guys.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Hannah. And thanks ever so much, everyone, for joining. Just echo Hannah's comments about ahead of a long bank holiday. So thank you all very much for attending. Just a couple of quick introductions. Obviously, Hannah mentioned I'm Molly Kent, work for Radar Healthcare. I'm very aware that a few people on the call may have never heard of Radar Healthcare, so I thought it would be pertinent to give a quick introduction as to why we're on this call. We are working with over 10,000 different healthcare locations across all sorts of different NHS private sectors. And essentially, we are a software provider. We are an integrated risk management solution, and we're driving improvements through an easy to use and integrated agile system. We have got a relationship with Milton Keynes and NHSI, and today we're specifically talking around LFPSE, how technology can underpin those new requirements, how a partnership approach creates sort of the environment for dynamic improvement. And over the course of the next hour, we'll be getting insight from both Paul and Marcos, so thank you for joining, on the successes and also challenges, understand a little bit more about the deadlines, what the future looks like, and obviously as the first supplier to be compliant with LFPSE, this is an exclusive webinar with an NHS Trust, MKUH, to understand more about the lived experience of LFPSE so far and sort of understand how an agile and flexible system is the key to being ahead of the curve with all of these changes coming into the NHS. So my first question is over to Marcos. Could you possibly run us through where the decision came from to move from NRLS over to LFPSE, and perhaps what some of the problems are that we're trying to solve with this move?
Yeah, sure. I think that this is a long time coming and expected by many people across the NHS. The NRLS, the National Reporting and Learning System, has been around for about 20 years now. And so it's kind of an old system, talking about in terms of digital systems. Is an old system. And the NHS England relies on the NRLS and the STIs as well to fulfill its statutory function to collect patient safety information across the NHS and provide advice and guidance reducing risks to patient safety. And so the primary motivation was to make use of new technology available. So there's a lot of opportunities coming from that in terms of improving performance, security, and user experience. And then tackle some of the issues that had been voiced by providers to us along the time that we've been running the NRLS. And I'm going to cite some of them. For example, one of the biggest issues is around the classification of patient safety incidents. So there was a lot of comments in terms of how unsuitable the classification within the NRLS is, and they were asking for a change. And also the people trying to make sense of that information also were voicing the same opinions that the classification provided through the NRLS wasn't suitable to support to support analysis that could really support delivering improvement in patient safety in terms of bringing all the data together from so many different settings and different providers, and trying to map into a single standard taxonomy in the way that it wasn't working. So it wasn't working for providers trying to give that information to us, and wasn't working for the people trying to make sense of the data on our side as well. So there's a lot of data quality issues and inconsistencies in terms of reporting. Timeliness around reporting was a big issue, and also it was some of the functionalities provided by the NRLS and the styles were not really suitable to some specific care settings, for example, primary care. So that wasn't much there for in terms of functionalities to make reporting easier within primary care setting. So those were kind of the some of the main issues, some of the main problems that we're trying to solve with the new digital service that is now called LFPSE, Learn from Patient Safety Events.
Thanks, Marcos. It's really interesting to hear the picture and the reason for the move, and a couple of the points you mentioned around the technology, the drivers for improvement, such as time spent reporting, accessibility. They're obviously key focuses for us as a technology provider in terms of how do we ensure that anything coming out into the NHS, any big wholesale changes, are accessible, they are designed in such a way that makes the transition easy and continuous. And I'd just like to, for a moment, talk about that from a solution lens. There are a few key design elements that we've sort of put into the system when designing how the LFPSE forms will be translated into the platform. And one of these pieces is around being context aware. So we know that all staff across the NHS are incredibly time-starved, they are pulled from pillar to post, there are a lot of competing pressures, particularly when it comes to reporting as well. So by ensuring that the forms and the processes that we are required to engage with are simple, they are easy to understand, accessible, it is really, really key. So ensuring, for example, if I'm filling out an incident LFPSE form, the question set that I'm being asked is different to if it were a risk, and it logically follows that path rather than one big form. And another piece I think the audience would be interested in terms of that ease of transition and use is around accessibility. So what can you do to make sure that these forms are accessible on a multitude of devices, such as mobile phones and tablets and laptops and so on, so that rather than that reliance of I need to go and report something, I have to go and sit down at a particular location, it's going to take me a long time, trying to find easy to use ways to actually engage with new processes and systems. One piece as well, it was born of a conversation I recently had with one of our NHS partners that I think is important to look at, is how can you integrate the right elements across the system? So being able to have analytics, dashboards, insight-driven dashboards as well that look at the cause and the effect and the impact of all of these things together. So you can easily see, okay, I've got an aggregated picture of where things are going really well and I want to share best practice, where things perhaps aren't going so well, where I want to put more resource. And the comment that was made from one of our NHS partners was around the shift from the previous system, which was more of a recording system, towards Radar being more about learning outcomes and ensuring you improve. So, Paul, I'm going to ask you your comments on this in a moment about that partnership approach piece, because I know that's a key pillar of how we work as an organisation, and it's born of the fact that healthcare is constantly evolving in the NHS and otherwise, but being able to have that partner that's horizon scanning, looking out for changes, brokering conversations with other organisations, that's really, really key to ensuring a true partnership approach, essentially, and having that support when these big changes come about. So, Paul, I just wanted to ask you a bit about your experience working in this sort of way with us and your experience of the system on the whole across MKUH, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, like you say, the partnership approach is really, really important. It's one of the things that we kind of picked up from day one at looking when we were looking at different systems, kind of the partnership approach and discussing what the perhaps the bits that we were finding difficult in our processes as they were, and then talking them through to see how it would work in the Radar system, and that's continued throughout. So now that we're live, went live in November, the same sort of discussions still take place. So we are relatively new. Previous system we had for many years, and we are just over 6 months into using Radar. So there are challenges. There are bits that we haven't got right in our design yet, so there are challenges that come forward, and we find, you know, the team approach, the partnership approach with Radar excellent. So we're able to discuss where it's not working and then make recommendations, and then we try and fit them into the system. Yeah, I'm just very responsive. It's been a really good from that perspective, a really good kind of partnership approach right the way through the developing it in the first place, but also now that we're in, also looking at where we can improve what we've already put in place.
That's great to hear. Thanks, Paul. I think also people will be very interested on those challenges and lessons learned. So I'm going to come back to that point later, because I think that's, especially through an LFPSE lens, I think that'll be quite valuable to people listening. But I think one of the key parts of that partnership is, as well as having that ongoing relationship, also identifying areas where we can question and challenge and say, why don't we think about it through a different lens? Why don't we look at it this way? Another organisation of a similar size and service type are doing this, and they find that this is very helpful. So I think there's many elements to partnership, and coming back to LFPSE is the main topic. It'd be good to understand your experience and your journey so far with LFPSE, looking at that kind of partnership approach that you've had with us and with MKUH NHSI.
Yeah, so I mean, we have been looking for a new system. So it's probably a year, 18 months ago that we started looking. We wanted to find a system that could do everything that our existing system did, but we were also looking in particular documentation audits for things that we were wanting to kind of add to it. But one of the key drivers was usability, and we did demos with, or Radar did demos with some of our staff, and overwhelmingly it was the one they chose as being the most intuitive system from the demos. What we found now, a slight challenge, it's very different to the previous system. So it's taking a little bit longer than we would have expected for them to get used to the new approach. But yeah, it's an ongoing process of talking through with the staff, what would they find easier. Some things we can change straight away, other things we think, well, actually we need to sort of talk to Radar about that and see what they suggest. And, you know, and Radar are very open to getting sort of suggestions on how we can sort of develop them ideas. So even if the system can't quite do it now, it's something that they can look at developing. So that's been really good. So we were looking for that. We chose Radar, and originally we were going to just implement Radar, taking over from the system that we're already using, but it became kind of apparent because of the time scale, and you have to give, well, it's no longer the case, but at the time you had to give notice to change provider on the NRLS system because of all the mapping and things in the background that needed to be done. And so that kind of led us down the path. We made the decision that actually, rather than stopping reporting to the NRLS, we needed to go across to the LFPSE. In hindsight, we probably would have done Radar first and then moved across, just so it wasn't two change processes for staff to deal with at once. We're kind of innovative, particularly with IT, so it wasn't really, we kind of weren't overly concerned about doing both at the same time. But so that's kind of how we moved into it. But throughout, NHS England, so Marcus's team have been very responsive, sort of open to feedback, taken it on board. Already made some changes. I know we've got the kind of latest version not quite live in our system yet, so that's just going to be upgraded in the next couple of weeks, which will show even more sort of changes from the feedback given. And they're already sort of still in consultation, looking at other ways that we can improve it from that as well. And again, Radar as well, they've been very supportive, and so it was kind of an easy transition from that point of view. Kind of the technical side of it, I kind of said on the podcast that we did, so said with that, I'm sure Marcus and Radar had things in the background sort of going on, but from a user perspective, it was relatively smooth to move across, and it wasn't too too technical from our elements to move across.
That's really good to hear. I know that I've been asked that question by other people looking at LFPSE and the change, and also a question that comes up is around how much can we change, how much can we not change? And I know that through Radar, because it's such a flexible system, as you alluded to, Paul, being able to obviously have the mandated question set, but still have the flexibility of, we also want to ask this question, we can add it in. We want to make the forms context aware, so rather than one long form, we can chunk it up. So could you talk to me a bit about sort of the influence, I suppose, that you've had on these question sets and what that collaboration has been like, Paul?
Yeah, so when we set it up, one of the things, because the questions on the LFPSE form are kind of, if you like, from a national perspective, some of them are not necessarily how we would have asked the question locally. So what we chose to do is we kept the forms very separate. So we had the Learning from Patient Safety event form, and we did add in patient details, so everything to do with the patient is on that one form. Obviously that doesn't go outside outside the trust, the patient details, but so we've got the LFPSE form, then you click on sort of save and complete, and it takes you to the next page, which are the local questions. So like you say, we could ask the questions that we wanted to, that perhaps LFPSE didn't, and we could also then make sure if there was duplication, we didn't need to include it in our form to try and reduce the amount of time. So that's kind of the approach that we've got, and we still kept it separate. So we've got these two, in a way, it's kind of two forms to fill in, one from the national perspective and one for local learning, and perhaps the extra questions that we want specific for us, so that the investigators can look at the kind of learning from that local level. So that's kind of how we've done it. As far as the feedback, we've been able to kind of make suggestions. So one of the questions on there, when you go into the instant form, it was asking what type of event is it, and it had the options of instant, risk, outcome, but the user had already gone into the instant form. So what we were finding is some people were selecting risk, and then it wasn't asking the right questions. but we've been able to have kind of that conversation with Radar, with LFPSE, and that's kind of being changed. So in the review, in the updates that we're expecting in a couple of weeks, because we've chosen incident, it knows to ask the incident questions, so it won't have that kind of bit in there. So that's one of the things that we've been able to kind of get changed, that there is that kind of dynamic changing of the form questions that came in. So yeah,
it's very helpful to listen to that from your perspective as well, Paul, because we know from our side, as a technology provider, one of the fundamental keys, I suppose, to success is ensuring that you can continuously change, iterate, update, because there are always changes, be it to LFPSE, be it to other areas around national audits, for example, be it around risk, all these different things. There are so many changes that come out, and by having a partnership approach, who's doing that horizon scanning, who is that person/people at the end of a phone and email to support, but also having the technology infrastructure to ensure that you can iterate and change very, very dynamically is really critical to success. And I know that this has had a light shone on it over the last couple of years because of the pandemic and the acceleration of change as well. And where people have been able to keep on top of processes and ensure that they're spending time where it can have highest impact is where they've got the right technology in place to facilitate that changing environment, essentially. I'm going to come back to a question that you started to kind of talk about earlier, Paul, and it's around kind of lessons learned, or also things for people to think about, because I know that obviously MKUH is the only trust that's reporting live. We are the first supplier, so a lot of people on this call will be thinking, what can I learn, what can I do when it's my turn to go live? So broad question, but what should other trusts think about when it is their turn, Paul?
I think one of the things to say is you know, not to be overly concerned about the actual change itself. As I say, from a technical perspective, Marcus and Radar dealt with a lot of that, and there wasn't sort of too much from my point of view to do from that side to get it set up and using that. One of the things that we have found is, because the questions are from a national perspective, the staff are finding it difficult to complete. So some of the questions they're finding challenging. They're not quite sure what it's asking. So this is part of that feedback that we've been doing, particularly with Marcus's team, and I know that they're sort of taking that on board on there. But that is kind of probably the key challenge that we have at the moment, is the questions are different to what we'd perhaps have asked at a local level, and therefore we are finding that staff are finding it taking longer to report than they perhaps would have done. That is something that's being worked on all the time, and I'm sure Marcus will come in about that. But like you say, this iterative approach, we're able to feedback. As I say, they are responsive, they are listening, they are making changes. So you know, it's an early, you know, very very early. Like you say, we're the only trust reporting, as far as I'm aware, and therefore, the more as people come on board, there'll be kind of more feedback to them to help develop that form. But that's probably one of the things to be aware of. So I guess probably one of my recommendations would be to make sure that the communication is sort of clear to staff ahead, that it is asking more questions from a different perspective, and that's why we chose to have it as two separate forms. So we could say, you have this bit to complete, that's from a national perspective, and then this is the bit that we're asking from a local point of view. So that was one of the challenges which continue at the moment, but I know the version that will be coming in a couple of weeks' time has already got improvements in it, and I know we're working on further ones. So we sort of just suggested some slight rewording of the questions just to make them quicker to read, and therefore quicker for the staff to fill in. and those sort of things. So just kind of tweaks to the system, or suggested tweaks to the system to make improvements. But that's probably just something to be aware of, that it will take longer for them to complete the form, because the questions are there, they're not what they're used to filling in, and that is just kind of a process that we're working on. So we're looking at our form, trying to make that simpler, plus also feeding back to Marcus's team to try and support making that because what all of us want is a form that's quick and easy to fill in, but gets the information we need to learn. So we've all got that same goal, and it's just a case of working together to form as sort of concise but informative at the same time. And it's that fine balance between if it takes a little bit longer to fill in to get more information that's usable, and then that's a positive thing. But at the same time, as you mentioned earlier, particularly in healthcare, kind of time is precious. So we need to make it as quick and easy to report as possible. So it's trying to balance those two things, and like you say, working in partnership with Radar, with the LFPSE to do that. But it's definitely worth just mentioning that there is that challenge, because it is taking longer to report than it did previously, because of the additional questions that we're asking currently. So that's just something to be aware of.
No, it's a helpful advice. I'm sure people will find it very interesting and useful on the call. I think one of the things that's also critical to the adoption, because using something is one thing, but true adoption is another, is around giving people the knowledge as to why this is happening, what is the reasoning behind the changes to the reporting, what is the impact on them as an individual versus the trust versus the NHS. And what we found is, working with other partners as well, also outside the realms of LFPSE, but being able to broker communication channels and have launch pack materials and those sorts of things that can actually enable organisations to say, we've made a change, we are doing these things this way, and these are the reasons why, so that people can understand, okay, I can access this in a different way, I know why I'm doing it, and it may be longer, as the LFPSE form does have a longer question set, but I understand the reason behind it, essentially. So Marcus, I'll turn over to you, but it'd be good to, similar question really, hear your thoughts on advice that you would give with this move away from NRLS and towards LFPSE.
Yes, so that's a very important point that Paul mentioned in terms of this spending time to work on the question flow. So the questions flow, because you're going to receive a kind of a blank form with LFPSE questions, and there are a lot of questions there. However, they're not to be presented to the user all at once, and it's really impossible to someone to answer all of those questions, or even to be presented to all of those questions. So you need to look at the question flow and start making that assessment in terms of how your local questions would feature alongside those questions or within those questions, and redesign that question flow and test that with your users. So there is no, we're not saying, so Paul is trying this approach where he presents the LFPSE questions first and then the trust questions after that. This is not, there's no one way fits all. Every single organization, every single provider needs to try that, see what questions they want to have themselves as their local questions, and see where best to present those questions alongside the national data return questions, and really test that with their users and have that conversation with their vendors in terms of giving a better user experience. Things like, for example, make sure that you ask all the mandatory questions, local and national mandatory questions first, and be very clear to make clear to the user that from that point on, they can already save and submit their events. And if they still have more time, they can carry on answering other questions. Some questions should not be presented at all to the first reporter. They are more to be answered by the risk team, for example, that will have a better understanding, and also the authority to declare that that incident, for example, is a never event or not. And so those type of questions shouldn't be presented to the first reporter. So they are that kind of idea that some questions will be answered at a later stage, and have really my recommendation is to have really that kind of a designing that question flow from scratch, you know, bringing the two sets together, the local questions, the national questions, and see how best to integrate that to create a good experience to your user. So that's the main point. And come and talk to us. You're unsure about something, come and contact us, have a chat with us. You think that this should be asked differently, come and talk to us. We getting this, we got really good feedback from Paul. We made change based on that, and this is how we plan to roll this out, is receiving feedback as people start setting up their forms and testing that with their users, coming back to us with questions, with challenges, and we work together with the providers to make this better for the end user, because that's the goal. This is not for us, it's for the whole NHS. So it has to work for everybody, because we want to get the information, and we want good quality information that we can actually act on. So to be able to do that, the user is the most important part. As a person that is provided that information needs to really understand what's being asked, and also feel that, you know, is rewarding for them to provide that information. This is not a task that they don't, that takes too long, and they don't see the purpose and all of that. So it's thinking about the user experience and have that open communication with us. So in terms of practical things, you all can have access to the test environment. So it's now a platform. Is just come talk to us, get your account on the test environment, have a look at the questions. We can give you the set of questions, look at your current forms and start designing that, and have that conversation with us, plan when you're going to make your transition, discuss the dates with your vendors, and see what the vendors also can, what support they can give to you in terms of enhancing the user experience. And this is key for this to work, is providing good user experience, and value the time that the user is taking to do this, and making that experience rewarding to them. So that's kind of my tip.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Marcos. I think such a sage point as well around ensuring that the forms are context aware, and you're only asking the things that are relevant to that particular user. Because if we all think about ourselves outside the context of healthcare, if we are filling something in and there's reams of questions and we don't know whether things are relevant, we are, you know, it builds that sort of inertia, and that I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to leave it. Whereas it's so critical to think about, from a technology provider perspective, will your tech partner be able to give you the infrastructure to really reflect your local nuances of how you want these questions to be asked, to ensure that the right questions are asked to the right people at the right time, to ensure you can still include things that you want to ask, which wouldn't necessarily be on the LFPSE question set, and to have that complete local nuance essentially, and that configuration to ensure that the processes are relevant. I'm really aware as well that we're talking about this, but people may not have actually seen it. So as well, to Marcus's point, if people want to have a look at it in a radar perspective and see what we're doing, I've got a couple of clips that I can show people. So please put a comment in the chat or the Q&A. I'll pick it up afterwards and send you some things, because I'm a visual learner. So visually, I'm sure people wanted to see what it actually looks like. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just saying it's a good example of the collaboration that we've talked about is around. So Marcus mentioned the question about, is this a never event? So there's a section of 6 or 7 questions at the end that are around those lines. So, you know, is it a never event? Is it a serious incident? Does it need duty of candour? On the first iteration of the form, that was and is currently what we have. That is a section at the bottom that the reporter does see. What we've done working with Radar, and I know Marcus's team as well, we've actually defaulted all of those to no for the reporter, and then put a message on the system to say, please don't answer these questions, they'll be updated later. So when they submit, the risk governance team, those that have that authorization, can then go in and update it and change it. So that's just a good example where on the initial form, those questions were being asked of the reporter, which they were kind of, we don't know on there. And so then we worked together around to kind of find a short-term workaround to it. My understanding is in a later version, I'm not sure if it's the one we're getting in a couple of weeks or not, but in a later version, it will be a separate set for the risk and governance team to look at, and won't be displayed for the reporter. But that's part of that collaboration. Like Marcus said, us testing it with the users, looking at feedback, making changes, and going from there. So I just thought it was a good example, and to show that process is in place and is working, and that you know, well, both Radar and Marcus's team have been very responsive to our feedback. So yeah, just thought it was a good example just to share that.
No, that's really, really good. Thank you. It's really good to hear that. And I think it's also that acknowledgement that it will always change, and there will always be you know, things that you can improve on and tweak. I mean, it's an ever-moving feast, and anything across sort of quality governance and patient safety in healthcare, being able to always identify how can we improve on this, how can we ensure that these are relevant to what our workforce are engaging with at the moment, and having that flexibility of design where you can iterate and you can have that kind of responsiveness. So yeah, really helpful to hear that example actually. I'm just looking at time, so I'm going to leave 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes at the end for questions, because I can see there's quite a few questions coming in. So I'm just going to ask about the future, looking to the future. So question from Marcos around the deadlines, because I know that people will be interested in that, seeing as they were quite recently released. So if you could talk to us a little bit about the deadlines and what they mean, I think people find that very useful.
Yes, so we went live last summer with LFPSE. So all the primary care organizations were then transferred from NRLS to LFPSE. And they've been using LFPSE since August last year. And then now we started transitioning the organizations that have been reporting through a local risk management system. And we have, I think that today we're coming with our 3rd organization live on LFPSE, reporting through a local risk management system. And in April, we then issue to all NHS providers that they have to the end of this financial year, so to the end of March 2023, to complete the transition from NRLS to LFPSE. So if they are reporting into the NRLS today, and using a local risk management system, actually is the only way to report into the NRLS today, because all the e-forms have been transitioned already and decommissioned from the NRLS. So if they are reporting into the NRLS, they have to the end of March 2023 to transition to LFPSE, because from April 2023 is when we will start to decommission the legacy system. So we're now helping the organizations to understand the process. We've been running Q&As with all providers. We already had booked 9 sessions with like around 40 organizations in each session, trying to answer all that questions and offering support to organizations. But the main point is to engage with their vendors, and have the plan with the vendors, because it does require a software upgrade. And that's what you need to have in mind, that you need to go through that with your vendor to make sure that you have the dates agreed and you can meet the deadlines. So it's important to emphasize that this is for organizations reporting into NRLS, because there's the timeline is in relation to the commissioning of the NRLS. So then you should transition so that you don't stop reporting. We already have set up our ways of sharing information with CQC, MHRA, and other data partners. This is all already working and in place for people reporting through LFPSE. And in terms of the new things now we are developing or enhancing the analytical parts of the LFPSE. So there will be new analytical functions, and you all will have more access to data through this new platform, because this is also one of the ambition of this project, is to make sure that we give more and better access to data to providers through the platform. And we also enhancing or not enhancing only, but we expanding the use of machine learning. And for example, all the incidents that they are reported through LFPSE are cleansed through a new process that use machine learning to find personal identifiable information, flag those incidents, tell the providers which incidents or which events have been flagged as potentially containing personal identifiable information. So this is one of the first set of kind of communication and feedback that we will be providing real time to providers. So we are working on that at the moment, as well as in the functions and extra data that will be associated with the new patient safety incident response framework. Because one of the goals of this system is not just to replace the NRLS, but it's TIES as well. So we did the part on in terms of the NRLS, and you continue improving that. Now we're addressing the TIES aspects on the system as well. So there is a patient safety incident response framework. There's a new framework that's being tested at the moment, and we're working to incorporate that into LFPSE. I'm conscious of time,
yes.
And I think we could give some time for some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Marcos, and thank you again, Paul and Marcos, for joining. Just to reiterate, I'm aware that people will be sort of unfamiliar with how it looks in a system perspective. So if you'd like to receive a bit of information after this about what it looks like and want a bit more information, please just drop a comment and I'll pick that up afterwards and follow up with you. But yeah, so Hannah, I will hand over to you to lead on the Q&A, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much for your sort of, I think they call it now fireside chat is what they call it. But yeah, really, really interesting discussion. I'm going to jump into questions straight away because we've had plenty coming through. So the first one that's come through says, is the system purely for reporting patient safety incidents, or does it have functionality to manage wider ongoing clinical safety risks? I'm not sure who wants to start that one off.
Yeah, I can pick that up. So from a radar perspective, absolutely. So LFPSE is one element of many things that fall under the patient safety umbrella. So whether it's around events, so event is a nice catch-all neutral term for all processes that you would want to report, from claims, complaints, through to mortality reviews, structured judgment reviews. The list is endless, all the way through to things like risk auditing, document management, workforce compliance. And the reason that it's such an integrated system is because within healthcare, there are lots of different pockets for these sort of pieces of information, these processes. And by integrating it all, you see the true value from your data. It's really insights driven. You can see the triangulation across all of these different elements. And that's, you know, the reasons why we're able to support a lot of different organisations across those 10,000 locations. So again, it's a quite new concept to a lot of people in healthcare. I'd love to send you a little bit of information if you're interested. Just drop a note in the chat and I can send something across.
Brilliant, thanks Molly. So the next question from Thomas says, how has LFPSE impacted on your reporting culture? I'm guessing that's probably one for you, Paul. So Thomas says, we've done lots of work to trim down our incident report form to promote easy reporting. Yeah,
so there's a couple of things that all happened at once. Obviously, you know, the pandemic, which everyone will be more than familiar with. We went live November last year, so it was kind of the tail end. I mean, I guess we're still the tail end now, but you know, it wasn't the very peak, but was during the pandemic that we went live, and prior and the previous months, our reporting numbers had already reduced because of less people physically being in the hospital. So it was already lower than it had been. Obviously, we were starting not just with the LFPSE, we were also a brand new system because we'd just moved across to radar. So we had three different things that kind of happened at once when we went live. What we did see is the first month there was quite a drop. But then month on month it's increased, with the exception of April. April didn't for whatever reason, but month on month the reporting rate has sort of gone back up, probably to sort of what we'd expect it to be, kind of what it was before. So you know, a change of system, there is likely to be an impact at the very beginning, I would have said, but our experience is it's still heading in the right direction, kind of going back up. So yeah, I think so.
Thanks, Paul. So another question we've had says, how do you build in the learning / actions from the incident report back in sort of business as usual ways of working? Does the system help to support this digitally, or is it through a dashboard report? I'm not sure who wants to grab that one.
I can pick up to start off with. I think fundamentally, yes. So the value of your data is in the actionable insights. So being able to identify, not just we're collecting this data for collecting its sake, it's what we're actually going to do about this, what we're going to learn from it, how we're going to share our outcomes, evidence learning, whether that's around sharing best practice where things have gone really well, or perhaps sharing where things haven't gone so well. And we find that there are a couple of key elements to consider. One is certainly that partnership and also the agility of the partner to configure processes and systems. Two is around embedding automated feedback and ensuring that the systems you've got in place are around promoting best practice, lessons learned, and that it's all around that culture of continuous improvement. Essentially looking at a cyclical way of doing things rather than that siloed working. Again, it's a relatively newish concept. It's certainly a different way of working to what a lot of people do. So drop me a note if you'd like to know more about it. And I think as well, it's about looking at how can we make our processes easier. So we know that People are, as I said, pulled from pillar to post. There are lots of different things people need to engage with in healthcare, whether it's around reporting, whether it's around the delivery of care, and ensuring that the processes are easy to engage with through phones, through scanning QR codes, whatever it might be, through voice recognition, and also ensuring that the dashboards that you do have are insight driven. So they're aggregating data in a really meaningful way and showing you, okay, here is something interesting to you because it's demonstrating a spike in activity you don't want or a drop in activity you do want. It's as simple as that. I don't know, Paul, if you want to kind of chip in from a user perspective, if that would be, don't put you on the spot there.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess what you have got is an action plan module, which helps you to then monitor. So you know, if you've got a piece of learning that you want to ask somebody to make a change, then you can put it as an action, which is then auditable. There's a kind of front dashboard when you log in, and you can see any of your tasks and when they're due, when they're overdue, etc., to help you keep track of it. If you've signed a task to somebody else, you can actually view their task and see where they've got to in doing it. So there's lots of kind of tools around the actions that you can use for it. The analytics that I think Molly was kind of referring to, that there's something called Pulse, where you can actually set thresholds. If it goes above it, it will tell you, or I believe it can actually sort of create an action as well. It's not something we've used yet, but I believe the system can do that. But it kind of, you've got thresholds, or if you know, if any particular type of incident you want to know every time it happens, you can set it up that way. So there is lots of different sort of tools and flexibility in the system that you can put in place to kind of monitor those sort of things. Yeah, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, I know you've got your hand up, but just one quick point to bounce off Paul's. Another piece is around making sure that where you're integrating, it's done in a really sensible and the right way, essentially. So something that we're doing is integrations with electronic patient record systems, which is commonplace for us, but things like IHI triggers. So when something is recorded in an EPR system, let's say a pressure injury, for example, the information will come into radar, the right actions will be triggered, sent to the right people. So you're limiting the gaps for error between your systems, and you're looking at that fully integrated piece in terms of how do I have that golden thread of data, and I can see exactly what's happening, why it's happening, the links between things. And my ultimate conclusion is I know what to do to make patients' safety better, essentially. So yeah, it's a really joined up process. But Marcus, I know you have your hand up. I don't want to miss your point.
Yeah, I just want to mention that also by having a consistent kind of national taxonomy or classification system, it helps to enhance the local data, because then you can learn from others as well. So you can get insights and add that into your own data and help that to with your local patient safety initiatives as well. So that's that aspect in terms of enhancing the data quality, the timeliness in reporting, making the reporting experience more rewarding to the user, and bringing all that together to enhance the information that you have available to support improvement initiatives as well. So that's I want to mention that as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Marcus. Another question we have from Callum. Is there, it says, do we have control? So I'm guessing, is there control over the automatic upload process, i.e. opportunity to quality check before uploading to LFPSE?
I think I should take that, and because this is something that we've been asked quite a lot. So the main point is that this is the system now creates this two-way communication between our system and your local system. That's what it is. It's the open port for two-way communication. So you change anything in your system, it changes in our system. We can then give you feedback, send the information back straight away. For example, someone reports something, we scan the description of incident and send the result of that scanning back to you. So there is no delays in terms of sharing information. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to review your incidents. You still have to do all of that. You still have to review, you have to, your time to cleanse the information, and to add more information. And every time that you update something, that's automatically updated on our end. So you don't need to worry about exporting and uploading somewhere else. That's the part that we removed from this equation. But yes, you do have control in terms of what you're going to do with how you're going to review that and how you're going to update those incidents. But the communication between the systems is open and happens real time. So once someone enters or submit an incident, it comes to us straight away. But that doesn't mean that this is not going to be cleansed, that this is not going to be scanned for patient identifiable information. All of this is still part of the process. Go on, Paul. You've had your end.
Yes, I'm just going to say from our experience, I mean, the way it would work is you fill in your instant form. When you press submit, the information then goes to the LFPSE. And as Marcus has said, you know, if later you go back in and you actually realise a piece of information's inaccurate or something's changed since it was reported, you can update the form, press save and complete, and it overwrites what was there. So there is that control, and that's one of the things we saw straight from Go Live is the time it saves whoever in your teams that currently do the NRLS submissions, instead of the lot of additional data quality work you do there before submitting and all the downloading XML files and things, all of that's gone. It does it automatically. So you would just review the incident, change the incident, and when you press save, it will then resubmit it and overwrite. So that's a big saving from day one, the time taken. You still need to do the data quality, but you do it direct in the form. And so there isn't all that additional uploading and everything.
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm going to try, I've only got aware of the time, so I'm going to rattle through as many questions as I can. Another one we've had come through says, has the implementation had any impact on your incident reporting levels? I guess that might be one for you again, Paul.
Yeah, so I'd say that's similar to the early one, in that when we first went live, we did notice that the reporting had gone down. As I say, we think it was a combination of moving to LFPSE, the pandemic, and moving to a new system. But month on month, apart from last month, the figures have gone up. So yeah, there was an initial dip, and then it's coming back up again.
Brilliant, thank you. So a question from Rebecca: what challenges were faced in regard to the movement of your data from your old system to the new one?
Let's pick that up. I might quickly start on that one, actually. So obviously it's more of a question to Paul in terms of the challenges, but when considering looking at a new system, when looking at moving data, there are a few different things to consider, one of which is what do I want to achieve in my new system, which I couldn't achieve in my previous system, whether it was around because my processes were ostensibly complex, or perhaps we had an issue with data quality, for example. We had mistyped names and numbers and all that sort of thing. So what we find is an assessment with each organisation we work with to look at what would suit you best in terms of how you move to a new provider, move to Radar Healthcare, but also not losing kind of quality of insights from your previous data. So generally being able to run analytics on the previous data, for example, and then also after a certain point draw a line and say we're moving to this new system now, and we're going to ensure that our processes are clean and tight moving forwards. We've got integrations to ensure that we've got the right information coming in rather than misnomers and mistypes. And there's a whole, you could literally talk for half an hour about this topic alone. It's a massive topic. So again, if people want information, drop a note in the chat. But Paul, do you think that's kind of a fair summary of our process and approach towards it?
Yeah, no, I think it is. It is a challenge to work out what's best for you. I mean, what we decided to do was to start fresh. So on our go live, anything reported from then on is on radar. Anything previously, we've kind of retained minimal access to the previous system with reduced licenses, so that we've got access to the old data. And then anything that was kind of like safety alerts that were still open, we manually transferred those across. That's how we did it. But there are, like you say, it's a topic in its own right. So it's weighing up what works best for you. But yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we just have time for one more, try and squeeze one more in. So Monica is asking, are independent healthcare providers mandated to submit patient safety information too, or is it just NHS trusts?
They're not mandated to, but they might have local, in their local contracts and local agreements with commissioners for NHS funded care, that there's an expectation that they will be reporting to LFPSE. So it's not mandated because they're regulated by CQC and they still can send their incident reports straight to CQC. But there might be some local agreements with the commissioners to send the incidents through LFPSE, and the commissioners then access the incidents through our system.
Lovely, thank you very much. Another question we also have, which I can really quickly answer now, is about whether you get a copy of the webinar recording. Yes, this recording will be made available on the events page. So yeah, it will be made, it will be uploaded, I think, shortly afterwards. I think we're going to have to wrap things up there. Apologies if we didn't get around to asking your question, but they will be shared with our panelists, and they should be able to send over answers to your questions. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended today, and thanks so much to our panelists. We have got a packed schedule of other digital health webinars coming up. This is my only plug. So if you have liked today, we've got plenty of more content coming up in the next couple of weeks. We've got regional events, the like. So please head over to the digital health website and register for plenty more. We do cover some really fascinating topics, so I would definitely recommend. I will stop plugging now, and I'm going to wrap it up. But thank you again to everyone who's joined, and thanks to our panelists, and hopefully everyone, please enjoy the Jubilee Bank holiday. Fingers crossed for some sun. I'm a bit worried about there's going to be some rain, as I was hoping to attend a few barbecues. So please enjoy the next couple of days if you can. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Paul and Marcos. Great to speak to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks for joining all.